College of Arts and Crafts and UCLA. Tim and Daniel both collaborated on the book that we are celebrating and launching tonight, which is why all of you are here, which is The Ballad of Huck and Miguel, a modern-day retelling of Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, in which Huck lights out from St. Petersburg, Missouri, to Los Angeles, where he meets Miguel, an undocumented immigrant with whom he forms a powerful bond as they flee Huck's murderous father and the law in pursuit of justice. Welcome to the show, Tim and Daniel.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
So we're going to talk for about half an hour, and then we'll do a Q&A after, just to let everybody know that you'll be able to join the conversation once we're done.
And just to give you guys a flavor of the novel, which obviously is launching tonight, we're going to have Tim read the first couple of paragraphs.
Happy to do that. All right, chapter 1, me and Pap light out for California. You don't know about me without you've been to St. Petersburg, which is in Missouri, which is where everything starts. That's a beautiful place right up on the big river. It's a wild place too, where there's all sorts of bully critters in the woods, and some of the people are just as wild as the critters. But there's some regular folk too. Nothing don't change in St. Petersburg but real slow. My friend Ben Rogers, his mama said that time done forgot us altogether and that the people are talking and living just like it's still the 1800s, even though everybody knows we already passed 2000 year. Well, I can't vouch for it. She might be stretching it a little bit, but then again, maybe not. It weren't a good thing, but a bad thing in her view for folks to get stuck like that. As for me, I like a place that don't change too much. There's other places, I'll tell you about one of them, where things change all the time so fast that a body can't barely keep up. And I come to see the profit in that too. This here is the full true story of how I left St. Petersburg for California and went on the run from authorities with a real live illegal Mexican. And I even got rid of my pap for good. Me and Miguel, we had a right bully venture on that concrete river in Los Angeles, which might be the biggest city that ever was. I'll tell it to the best of my abilities. There might be a few stretchers along the way, but I'll work them in nice and proper so as you won't notice too much.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Could everybody hear that okay? A little louder? Okay, so let's get a little bit closer to the mics, just to make sure that everybody can hear you guys. Thank you for reading that.
You're welcome.
And congratulations on the book.
Yeah,
Thank you. 4 years of work.
Oh my gosh.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that work? Kind of what inspired the project? What was your process working together as a writer and illustrator?
So my wife and I were out kayaking the river, and around that same time I was rereading Huck Finn, as I do every couple of years. I've been a big Twain fan since I was a teenager. And when you're out on the river, it's you realize it's a wilder place than you think from just driving it over it on the freeway. And you just started to think about that as a place where you could have an adventure, and started picturing Huck on the river. And then it took a while to kind of figure out, okay, well, if he's on the run in Los Angeles and he's escaping down the river, well, who's he escaping with? And eventually came to think that the right way to tell that story was an undocumented immigrant. And so wrote the book in 2016 and met Daniel about a year ago. And so Daniel and I have been collaborating on the illustrations for the book for the last year, and feel so fortunate to have someone of Daniel's caliber doing the art for this book. The illustrations are just gorgeous, and they really contribute to the story in an incredible way.
Daniel, how did you get drawn into the project?
Well, through a mutual friend of ours, Christine, who's here tonight. She introduced us, and we had a meeting, and the book was still getting like its last touches, so he was still editing the book, yeah, we just got straight to work, right? Like we just started. I mean, it felt easy, Like I understood what he was trying to do with the book and with rewriting the thing, and I could imagine already what the illustrations would look like, just because I grew up here, and the setting, the LA River, is something that I'm very familiar with. I grew up blocks away from the river in Mill Heights, and remember crossing the 6th Bridge, although it's gone now, but that was a big part of my my landscape growing up and living in Los Angeles, was the river and the bridges, like never crossing. So it always played a big part in my personal landscape, but also in my work. some of my work has the river is present in it. And yeah, we just got straight to work.
Well, Daniel has a great sense of story, and so we were really able to engage on particular scenes, you know, that we wanted to illustrate big cinematic moments. You'll see one of the illustrations is fireworks exploding over the Glendale Narrows while Huck and Miguel pass underneath, and it's just an incredible cinematic moment. And then there are other details that Daniel does that also add to the drama of the story. There's a moment when Miguel is trying to inject himself with anti-venom after having been bitten by a snake, and it's a really powerful detail that brings the story to life in a really cool way.
Can you talk about your printmaking process also? Because I was very struck by the, because they're woodblock prints or woodcut prints.
Lino pen.
Lino pen.
Yeah.
So can you explain kind of how that process works and like how you use it to kind of bring the print story to life?
Well, you know, it's kind of, when people kind of encounter my work, they think it's like a pen and ink drawing, maybe. But the reality is that those are carvings that I've done onto a surface, and the surface is linoleum. It's just flooring linoleum. I buy it from Linoleum City here in, you know what I'm talking about, the big shop. This is Linoleum City, like off Santa Monica Boulevard by Vermont. And I buy like sheets of that, and I carve into the blocks. And then I print it using an old letterpress machine. And that's how I make the image. I don't know, and I kind of just fell into doing that, into that way of making images by necessity. When I was living in the Bay Area, I didn't have access to painting materials the way that I did when I was living in LA. I was part of a free after-school art program. When I went away to college when I was 18, I was kind of stuck with not having access to that, but printing, all you need is a carving surface, ink, and some paper, and then you can store it away underneath your bed, and if you need to move out, you just put it underneath wherever you travel, you know?
It's very portable that way.
It's very portable. So, using that to tell the story, I think Tim was looking for like something that would hark back to the original publication of the book, which was heavily illustrated with pen and ink, drawings and engravings. So it felt like a natural match.
So actually, well, that brings me to a question that I wanted to ask both of you, which was this story, obviously, Huckleberry Finn is a famous story, has to do with childhood, probably has, it sounds like Tim, has much to do with your own personal childhood as a young boy, reading and growing up with the book. Can you tell us a little bit about, this is for you both, how you grew up, how you might have encountered this story before, where you grew up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I would say that I did not have an extremely adventurous childhood. I grew up in suburban Milwaukee, and I was a rather well-behaved child who was very concerned about doing well in school. And I unlike Twain, I think Twain learned how to misbehave very early on in life. I didn't learn to misbehave properly until maybe I was 30. Hopefully I've outgrown that at this point.
That story is next.
But, for me, writing in the voice of a child is just really fun. I had so much fun writing this book because I was trying to see Los Angeles, the city that I love, through the eyes of this naive kid from backwoods Missouri, and that was just a really fun way to kind of re-experience the city. Huck he's an abused kid, he's a resilient kid, and that's just that's a character, a protagonist that as a reader you find yourself bonded to. And the other thing about writing from the point of view of a kid is I think, especially writing for adults through a child protagonist, is that I think we have an easier time suspending our disbelief when we're reading the voice of a child, and so it allows you to have a little more fun with that adventure down the river in a way that if I was writing from the point of view of an adult, I think you're going to be a little more skeptical of some of those things that happen in the way.
Sure. Can you talk a little bit about? Obviously, it's a modern retelling of of the tale of the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Can you talk about the kind of translation work that you're doing? One of the things to pick up on what you're talking about writing from the perspective of the child is that what works really well in the novel in both novels actually, is the defamiliarization that writing from the perspective of the child lets you see. So there's like some very LA things that happen in this novel. Like there's a kind of cribbing on the Kardashians. There's like a reality TV show that like involves all these kind of insane characters. So can you talk about what LA lent you as kind of a place in which to explore this like larger political kind of question about an undocumented immigrant?
Yeah, I mean, LA is a big, diverse place, right? And there are many, many different Los Angeles, and we all experience, each one of us experiences many Los Angeles during any given week. And, you know, the fun part of a road, I won't call it a road movie, it's not a movie, right? But a road book, right? It's a journey book. And so the two main characters are able to meet a lot of different folks, right? And so we were kind of able to have a little fun with the different subcultures and different types of communities that emerge around the river and you know, and different types of families that exist in LA. And so we just tried to have a little fun with that.
And Daniel, would you tell us about your childhood and what you brought? I mean, you grew up in LA. What did you bring from that to the project?
Well, I don't know. For me, it was the love of the city, and I hope that comes through in the way that I made the images and the knowledge of the space. You know. So I mean, one of the things that I did. If you look in the book, there's a lot of animal illustrations, and if you look real closely, they're not in a pristine environment. There's like, and for me, I mean, I'll give you like, for me, I thought it was hilarious that there's this beautiful illustration of a skunk, and then there's a floating aerosol can next to it. I think it's funny, you know. Or, you know, there's just to get you like a sense of scale, there's an Arroyo Seco toad, which doesn't live in the Arroyo Seco anymore, but there's a cigarette butt next to it, you know. So it always clues you in like, okay, you're looking at this animal, but it's not in a pristine environment. I think one image in particular, and you know, I could have added maybe 15 more illustrations to the book, but like the budget and then also our time.
We ran out of time.
We ran out of time more than anything. But one of the illustrations that Tim let me add was the LA River Cats off of Zoo Drive. For me, that was like important to have, even though they're not there anymore. I think.
Can you tell us what they are?
Yeah, the LA River Cats. If you go on the 5 freeway and you make your way into like the Geometry Museum or the LA Zoo, you exit Zoo Drive and you get this view of the LA River. And there's these sewer caps with these pointy little triangles at the top. Artist Lily Moon went around painting the cat faces over these in the 80s and 90s and even like up into the 2000s. But before him, there was another artist, a woman whose name I can't recall. She was doing that, and it was always like a constant presence on the river, but particularly on that exit. And it's just like markers like that, I think, needed to be included in the book, you know. And
yeah, I want to come back also to the wildlife. You know, we were originally trying to illustrate different plot points of the novel, and Daniel started getting really excited at one point about doing these wildlife portraits that are often used in the chapter headings of the book, and they're just gorgeous, gorgeous prints, and it's a theme in the novel, is sort of the wildlife in LA, and I don't know of any other major city in the world where wildlife, especially on the east side, wildlife's just a part of your life in LA. You know, you run into coyotes, you run into skunks, you know, there are red-tailed hawks flying overhead, and Daniel captured those in such a beautiful way, but he also tried to do that with capturing these urban details as well, and combining the urban and the wild in the same illustration. It's I think it's consistent with how a lot of us experience the city.
Los Angeles, yeah, absolutely. Can you also talk, Tim, about how you got into that voice, which is very particular, right? I mean, this is also true of Huck Finn's narrative voice in Twain's original, but it's difficult to read. It's almost Shakespearean in that way, where you kind of have to read it aloud to yourself in order to, as a reader, get yourself into the rhythm of it. I wonder what that was like to write, and like how you inhabited that voice and perspective.
Yeah, I approached it with a bit of trepidation. I was kind of excited about the project, but I approached that with a little bit of trepidation. But once I sat down, it just kind of worked. And you know, a big part of the editing process was going back to that, and Huck misuses words in a really fun way.
Constantly, yeah.
Kind of mangles the language, but in a really fun way. And I was talking to my wife about this earlier. It's one of the great joys of being a parent that you don't really think about it. Your children just mangle the English language in really interesting ways, right? That sort of reveal things. Like, for example, we have 4 princesses in our house: Snow White, Cinderella, Belle, and Cinderbooty, the pink princess, which is obviously Sleeping Beauty. So anyway,
Cinderbooty is a much more exciting.
I know it's way better than the original.
Also sounds like a
Much more
great
active.
drag name. Welcome to the stage, send the booty.
Cinderbooty is an ongoing character in our house. That it was really fun to try and do that. It was a challenge, and a big part of the editing process was going through over and over which parts are working, right? Not just with me, my editor, David Hewlin, helped with some of that, right? Identifying which parts of that vernacular were working and which weren't, and kind of polishing it,
Can you both talk about developing, because as I understand it, it was a collaborative, developing the character of Miguel, right? Like what informed him. Also, obviously, Miguel, who is the undocumented immigrant at the center of the story, is also, if you look at Twain's original, he's linked to Jim, who was trying to escape slavery. And so what connections do you see between those experiences, and how did you guys kind of try to bring a very concrete characterization to Miguel in the novel?
Yeah, I'll start. I want to hear Dana's answer this. Miguel is the hero of the story, right? I didn't set out to write a story about immigration policy, right? And very early on in this project, I was talking to a Twain scholar, Laura Trombley, and she said to me that Huck Finn isn't about race, it's not about slavery, it's about an abused kid looking for a safe haven, right? Now the safe haven that he finds is in his friendship with the escaped slave Jim, right? And so, you could read a message into that if you want, but it's more a book about friendship than anything else. And so that was important to me. Now, I don't think, you're not gonna read this book, there's not gonna be a big mystery about what my feelings are about immigration policy, but that's not the central theme. And Daniel really helped with the character of Miguel and Miguel's speech patterns and his history, and we kind of rounded out the character with Daniel's help.
Yeah, so when Tim started giving me the parts of the text that involved Miguel, I kind of, I started looking at it and relating it into how my uncles would behave, because I come from, my family is Zacatecas, they were around horses, they were cattle ranchers.
Okay.
So
which is also what Miguel does.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was, when I read certain parts, I would tell Tim, hey, it would be better if you use this word, or maybe Miguel does this instead of that. So Tim was really open to my criticism and my suggestions. Yeah. So and that's what for this project. I think that's one of the great things, that Tim didn't come in with his ego and was like, here, elevated. It was just like a collaboration. It was like he was open to suggest. We were both open to each other's suggestions. But in forming that character, Miguel, it's a composite of a lot of people in my family that, some that were undocumented, some that work with horses. In particular, if you look at the illustration of Miguel injecting himself with the antivenom, that belt buckle is a rodeo belt buckle that was left to my friend Romeo when his father passed away. His father left him that belt. So that little detail in there just kind of, for me, brings Miguel to life and relates him to real people rather than... So a lot of the mannerisms that are written in the book are coming from that source.
Was there something that you encountered, and Daniel, that you were like, this is just not right. This would never happen. Would never say this.
I think La Llorona. Like the way she appears is like very, very particular, and I was like, no, like she would never say that. She will. Number one, she would never wear black. Right?
I had her in black, which is inappropriate, I understand.
And she would never say mi hijo. She would say mis hijos, mis hijos. And yeah, like that like stood out right away. Like, no, you have to get it right. Like, I mean, that's kind of a big deal. You messed it up.
I mean, that whole process was extremely fun for me. I mean, first of all, I've got this book, and I'm, Daniel and I are talking back and forth. Let's try this, let's try that, and Daniel just brought himself to the project, right? He brought his full self to the project. We talked through the story, and he's just, we're going back and forth with these amazing images and illustrations. It was really fun to write the book, but that was kind of a lonely process, right? The last year of collaborating with Daniel was just incredibly fun to see him work, and the amount of work that he puts into each one of those liner cuts is incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah, after the project ended, we missed our weekly visit.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I would say, like at the time, like all right, 10 sketches and 10 prints by this date, and he would come in and check on me. Once in a while, we'd really have 7 or 5, but like we would always check in with each other. And it was just constantly, it was just kind of really easy to communicate in a really easy and clear direction, and his openness to the suggestions.
It's interesting because it's almost an older style of author-illustrator collaboration as well, that I think doesn't happen that much maybe
Rockwell
anymore.
Kent-esque, actually. I was thinking like the kind of
The woodcuts?
or the lineup cuts.
Oh, right, yeah.
Well, it's partly the reason we decided to indie publish this book is that the big publishers won't let you do this. The book would not exist with Daniel's illustrations. It would not exist in its form right now if we had decided to go down that route.
And why is that?
I don't know. That's just industry standard practice, right? First of all, going to a publisher and saying we want to do an illustrated novel for adults, right? That's a tough sell.
Especially if it's not explicitly a graphic novel.
No, exactly.
I think that there's like genre problems.
Exactly. And then if you do that, they are going to want to pick the illustrator, right? They're investing in the book. They want to pick the illustrator. I can understand that, but I'm certainly glad we decided to go the route we did.
I know that a little bit before you'd said that you had not really set out to write a book about immigration policy or politics, really. But at the same time, it is really hard to escape the connections between Miguel's experience, which is narrated quite beautifully, as a child who was brought, and they talk about the difficulty of his passage into the United States, and then obviously the reason that he comes under threat is because he saves Huck's life. So it's hard to miss those kind of connections, and the incredibly precarious status of almost 2 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States right now, that because of a feckless Trump administration and GOP Congress is like increasingly under threat. So like
well, I'll say, I wrote this book pre-Trump, and I have concerns about the country's immigration policies.
Even before, yeah, we should say that.
But from a storyteller's point of view, they're in the most important way. They're very similar in the sense that how could you be a good man and be on the wrong side of the law, right? In Civil War era America,
right? And that's what Huck is struggling with.
Escape slave, exactly. Same thing right now. How can you be a good man and be on the wrong side of the law? And as a storyteller, you need drama, right? And someone being on the wrong side of the law, as painful as that is in real life, for a storyteller, that's helpful. That you need that sense of drama and stakes. Miguel, there are strong themes of fatherhood in the original Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and there are strong themes of fatherhood in this book. Huck's father is, he's a murderous psychopath, right? And in a way, Huck finds a father figure in immigrant Miguel.
And Daniel, would you speak a little bit about that? You've already said that you brought a lot of personal experience to your illustrations. We're obviously in the midst of a crisis that is nearing March 5th, right, is when protections run out. Are you feeling an urgency with this project in particular now, or did it always feel urgent?
I'm happy that it's a theme within this project, and I'm happy that it's something that we're talking about. I don't know, but it's also something that we've been talking about for a while, you know, for a really long time. For me, it's nothing new. It's kind of like, it's been ongoing since I could remember, you know, since when my parents were undocumented, before they got their citizenship. It's been like constant, but, you know, to bring it forward like this, within a novel, and just have it be, just have the opportunity for people to engage with it that way, I think is helpful. And I think we need to start looking at how be critical of the narrative we're being sold about immigration is. It's not the way that they're telling it, you know? There's a lot of different ways that it happens, that people end up here and get caught between the lines of like law and legislature and all this other stuff, you know? And at the end of the day, it's someone's life, you know? But books like this and projects like this kind of like give you a facet of that.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Can you talk about how you feel that like art and also literature kind of combine to help like give us a real sense? People that don't have that experience, who don't know people that are going through that experience, that like help make it concrete or real or graspable for us.
I mean, it's like someone sitting down and telling you a story. It's like being a willing listener to that story rather than having someone speak to you and then get frustrated and then like try to, you know, I mean, this is the perfect vehicle to reach someone's mind and heart. This through art and through literature, rather than for having someone like debate and like get heated and then like argue and then just be angry at the end of it and just stay staunchly in your point of view, staunchly in yours. And maybe if, you know, maybe through these cultural vehicles, you'll break that vision and maybe see some humanity, you know?
Yeah.
But I think, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, the impact of literature, though, is kind of on a longer time horizon, right? You know, the urgency of current debates about current policy, right? I mean, our book, unfortunately, doesn't really speak to that, except for the fact that we have a good man at the center, right, who's sort of the big, you know, is feeling the brunt of some of the policies. But it doesn't help solve the current. I wish it did, but it doesn't. Yeah.
Something that I also wanted to ask you is, Tim, you kept saying that this book is for adults. But while I was reading it, I was wondering why isn't it for children too? In terms of learning something, telling a story, do you not think of it as a book that kids can engage with?
So I think of it as a book that could be appropriate for high school students. Sometimes they teach Huck Finn. I've been talking to a lot of English teachers in the context of this book, and they sometimes teach the original Huck Finn to middle school students. And that book is a very mature book, right? There's a lot of social satire, there's a lot of irony, the language is difficult, there's obviously the racial issue, right? Those are very difficult things for a 7th or 8th grader, like a 13-year-old to handle, right? I do think that this good book could be appropriate for a sophomore or junior or a senior in high school as a way to kind of talk about the original maybe, and we're talking to some teachers about experimenting with that. But I don't think of it as a kid's book because I think there's also Huck's father is trying to kill his son, right? And so
yeah, there's a lot of intense stuff that goes on.
Yeah. Well, it's like I don't know if you guys have ever seen The Night of the Hunter. There's a Charles Lawton movie from the 50s in which Robert Mitchum plays an evil preacher, and he's chasing these two kids. They know where the money's hidden, and this murderous preacher is chasing these two kids down a river. You know, that's a movie with two child protagonists, but I don't know if I want my 7-year-old watching that movie. Although, you know, it has a certain stylistic element that feels like it's for kids. So I don't know. Who knows? I don't have a 7-year-old yet. We'll find out when she gets the TBD.
Okay.
Should we take some questions?
Yeah, let's take some questions from the audience.
All right.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
I'm curious, how did you land on the name Miguel for Huck's companion?
So I'm just going to repeat the question to make sure that everybody heard it. How did you land on the name Miguel for Huck's companion? So it was asked.
I wish I could remember the answer to that question. I remember playing around with several different variations. I do remember I was specifically playing around with variations of James, right? And Hispanic variations on James, and none of them seemed to work. They didn't fit, and so I started playing with other things, and it was mainly a matter of feel and sound, and I, to be honest, that was a totally intuitive decision that I made very, very early in the process. So I don't remember exactly.
Oh, why did you want to use the name James?
Oh, because Jim. Miguel is modeled on Jim from the original book.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you sense a disdain on the part of, let's say, New Yorkish, Woody Allen-ish viewers of Los Angeles, and/or your native population in Milwaukee toward Los Angeles, that you, as someone who has affection for the city, are trying to talk about?
No, go ahead.
Just repeat the question so we make sure that the entire audience can hear it and the listeners on the radio might be able to hear it later. Do you experience a disdain from the New Yorkish, Woody Allen-ish contingent of people, or alternately from the Milwaukee-ish and Midwest? Otherwise, I personally am probably the Woody Allen-ish contingent as a New Yorker, contingent of people toward Los Angeles. That's the question. Okay.
I'll be curious if Daniel has a perspective. I see a lot less of that these days, and maybe it's just because I'm living here. It just seems like there's a lot less sense of LA as being an inferior city. I just get the sense that that is slowly fading. Or maybe quickly fading. I love living here. I mean, all the best things in my life have happened in this place, right? Or Milwaukee, but the last 20 years here, and fascinating people live in this town, and it's just such a vibrant cultural city, and you're surrounded by all of these different cultures colliding, and we all get along like extraordinarily well. In the big picture, I think. And I just find it a really exciting place to be. And most people who visit me here seem thrilled to be in LA. I hear more complaints about Milwaukee and New York.
I haven't really encountered people saying that. Well, I will say though that when I was living in the Bay Area, people couldn't believe that I was from LA. And
Why was that?
Oh, I don't know, I just got along with people and they were like, okay, you can stay, but, tell your friends to go, we don't want, LA people in San Francisco. And I don't know, it was like this San Francisco versus LA thing, and
Maybe that's the real people that have disdain. It's just like Bay Area to SoCal, problem.
But, it's like, I like both. I don't think I've ever had, put one above the other, but for some reason, people in the Bay Area, San Francisco particularly, always, want to be on the map somehow above LA, and art and culture and literature. I never understood that. It's just it's beautiful. The Bay Area is beautiful, and LA is, LA. They're both, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
So you can't really compare them both.
Yeah, it's one-sided, I would say. I can't say we're that concerned about it.
I have a comment first. Tim, you were saying that you...
This is Christina, by the way, the person who introduced Daniel and me. Me and Daniel.
So glad.
I still remember that bottle this time.
That's right. You had a comment about saying, you said, Tim, that this story is not going to present a solution for immigration policy right now, but my polite disagreement is anytime a story is presented with humanity about immigrants, it brings us as a society a step closer to a humane solution. So I think that there is some value in that. My question for you and for Daniel is now that you've been immersed in the story of Huck and Miguel, I wonder how it's changed you, how it's altered you as a writer, as a parent, as a transplant Angelino. And for you, Daniel, how has it altered you as a native Angelino and as an artist? How has this story altered you both?
Sure. I mean, for me, I visit the river a lot more. I don't know, like, coming through this project really changed me just because of the amount of work that I did for it. And coming through, after you do like 45 lino cuts, there's no way that you can come out the other end without, you know, your style being changed dramatically. But I think as an Angelino, I don't know, I feel like I want to capture more of it in my images because it's changing so fast. You know, maybe I'm getting older. I mean, one of the two. It's just the city's changing in some ways good, in some ways bad. You know, and it's kind of like the LA that I grew up with, that I remember, is fading really fast. You know, and I feel
Can you
an
talk about
urgency.
that a little bit, actually? Can you talk about how that's happening?
How LA is changing.
How LA is changing?
Well, I mean, first of all, downtown LA, I remember downtown LA on the weekend, like tonight would be just a ghost town. And except for me running around, you know, the financial district, kind of oohing at all these different spaces and places, like the Spanish Steps over by the library, or going to the public library, and just being able to walk through. There's like, there's nothing, no traffic, no cars, nothing really. I mean, Broadway's always been a vibrant center for I hate saying Latinos, but what other word to use? Latinos, you know, for Latino, you know, for people to congregate and go shopping. And now it's kind of like been filled in, and now there's a demand for housing that's closer to downtown because there's been more business development, and there's things to do and see and visit. In the middle, it's put a stress in the communities around downtown. It's put a stress in my community in Ballad. It's just people struggling with housing, and I'm very aware of that, and I see it, you know, and it's kind of like one of those things. It's like, well, what's the solution? I could go out in the streets and yell at newcomers and be like, hey, get out of my neighborhood, but does that really solve anything? Like, what's the root cause of that problem, and what's the solution? Is very hard, and it's very nuanced. And I find myself in between that, asking like, well, what's the best way I could help? And I mean, that's just the alley that I live in right now. It's like housing is a very big issue. The explosion of the homeless population is a very big issue. It's always been a big issue, you know. And like, what's the solution to that? And I don't see us us pushing towards a solution, rather than like a long-term solution, other than just pushing them out of the way. And it breaks my heart, you know, but that's the city I live in, and that's the city that I, you know, want to continue to live in, because I know and I have faith that we will come together and, you know, hopefully alleviate some of those problems. You know, I'm hopeful.
I do want to answer Christina's question as well. I mean, one way I've changed is just my friendship with Daniel, honestly. That was a very rewarding year that we spent together, and I don't see the work in the same way that I saw it a year ago. You know, I had a finished manuscript a year ago, but I don't see the work in the same way as a result of working with Daniel. So that's one thing. And then secondly, like Daniel, the project kind of forced me on the river. And I'd kayaked the river, I'd hiked and biked a little bit, but you know, for the project, I ended up going, you know, from the headwaters in Calabasas all the way down to the Long Beach estuary. Wow. And that, you know, it's just a fascinating place. It functions as a sort of underworld for our city. You know, it has a very different role in our city than does the Mississippi in the life of the country back in the 1800s. But it's one other way in which it's affected me.
I think we have time for one more question.
Get a mic. My question is actually for Daniel, And I want to know a little bit more about the process of how you guys came together to work on the images. Was there a particular print that was more difficult to figure out, or that you went through a lot of drafts or back and forths, either because it was technically difficult or trying to figure out how to portray something visually the right way? Was there a specific one that, you know, sort of you guys really worked on?
I think the night scene.
Yeah.
Maybe we went back and forth on that from like a 2-page, and then it turned into like,
And the cover image.
oh, the cover,
the big ones.
yeah, the big one. So Tim was doing the final drafts of the book as I was doing the lino cuts. So one of the things we did, well, first he made a list. Like this is the list of illustrations I'd like, and then I had him take like a couple lines like of before and after the action takes place that I'm illustrating, just so I can get a sense of to place the illustration. And then I would make a sketch, really rough sketch, and really rough idea, and then we would talk over them. I think the first one that I did was like the coyote. And then after that, we went into doing like the smaller ones, like Huck escaping the RV. We called those spot illustrations, and then we started tackling some of the bigger ones. One of the ones, I think the cover image we were struggling with was because we already had kind of like this big image of Huck and Miguel in the river with the fireworks, and then the cover we didn't want it to make it too close to an illustration that was inside. But I'll let you.
Yeah, I think the cover one is the one I remember as you know, the cover has some you're limited in design in some ways, and so we had some constraints there. Excuse me?
For listeners who might not be able to see the cover, would you describe it?
Yeah, so it's basically a shot of downtown LA with the river in the foreground, kind of a greener part of the river. So this is the Glendale Narrows, where the river is what's called the soft bottom river, where it's not completely paved over, and there's lots of wildlife, lots of foliage. And so what's great about that image is that Daniel's capturing the city at sunset with the skylines. So there's obviously the urban element, but also the wild element, and then Huck and Miguel are in the very foreground, making their way down the river.
All right, maybe one final question.
I just think it's curious that I grew up in LA too, and the LA River for me is concrete. And so hopefully this book maybe will bring it back into the ocean and every place else here, right?
Well, I'll say, one thing I should say is that the Friends of the Los Angeles River are here. They've got a table at the back.
Oh, it's great.
Huge fan of their work, revitalizing the river, and 10% of my proceeds from tonight will go to Fuller, and they've been very supportive and helpful.
Where do you both live? Because this city, like you said, is so huge that where you live also sort of, speaks to. And then I had a question for you, Dan. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you came to your art? Yeah, I'm sort of curious how.
Oh, you want to answer?
Yeah, so I live kind of on the border between Glassell Park and Mount Washington, and so very close. I can see the river from my porch, but I got to use the long lens. But it looks beautiful in the morning.
Well, I still live in Well Heights, and my studio's in Highland Park, over on Avenue 51 by the train tracks. And how I came around to doing my art was really funny. I was at California College of the Arts, Arts and Crafts when I was there. And everybody was running to take those tech courses. This is back in like 98. So everyone wanted to take like all the coding and all the web design courses, which that curriculum was being built as it was being taught. So it was very clumsy. It was like the beginning of like the internet, kind of almost. Wow, I'm old. So there was all these great professors that were teaching print design that had trouble filling their classes up, and I got a chance to take classes with Doug Akagi, who is a designer who designed like the original Gap logo, and then with typographers like Philip Crane, who took us to Center for the Book. And then I took, that's where I got exposed to letterpress, and then later on I would take like free community courses at the Mission Cultural Center for Linocut with Juan Fuentes. And then later on I would like volunteer my time at Center for the Book, so that I would get a chance to play with the letter cooks. And then I learned about letterpress that way. So by the time I came to Los Angeles in 2002, I already had 5 years of experience doing printmaking and letterpress. In 2005, I published a book, a little artist book called 8 Omens of Misfortune, which relates the 8 omens that the Aztecs saw before this coming of Spanish. And that was all done in hand-set type with lino-cut illustrations. It's a small little accordion book. And that's where I kind of like cut my teeth and like, all right, I brought it all together and I could do this thing, and I've been doing it ever since.
Well, and what's so wonderful about Daniel's studio, I mean, it's such a manual, mechanical effort, and if you haven't had a chance, we have a book trailer, kind of a making of trailer that talks about how Daniel made the art and shows him at work, both carving and printing. It's just really cool to see, and it's just such an old school art. It's cool.
All right, so we'll have to end it there. We've been speaking with Tim DeRoche and Daniel Gonzalez, who are the collaborators behind the new book, The Ballad of Huck and Miguel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just a quick note, I do have some of the original artwork. If you want to take a look at it, and if you're interested in purchasing it, just see me. And Tim will be here for some.
Well, we're going to be signing books somewhere.
Yeah.
I can talk about that. Can everybody hear me? I can also borrow maybe one of these.
Thank you. Hi everyone. So if you haven't gotten a book yet, we have them right behind you at the cashier, and then just hang out, mingle, and we'll set up for the signing right here on the side of the stage. The place to line up is kind of an L-shaped line. The beginning of it will be right here between the literary nonfiction section and the writing section. And then the rest of the line, if you see the giant mammoth head, yes, and the dungeon, it's kind of parallel to the giant mammoth and the dungeon sign, and then it'll turn, make a sharp right. I think that'll be clear. So thanks guys so much for coming out.
We'll also put out a mailing list if you guys want any updates on Daniel's work or my next work. You can sign up there.
And one last announcement.